Okay, well, I'm Elise Moore, and I'm going to be your tech support here for today. So I would love for everybody right now to mute yourself, other than our wonderful speaker, Kathy, and our introducer. But if you can all mute yourselves, that'll be really wonderful. And if you have any questions or comments that come to you while Kathy McKintosh is giving this wonderful talk, you can just go to the bottom of your screen where there is a chat feature, and just click on chat and type in your question or comment just as it comes to you. And then at the end of the talk, we'll go back and see what the questions and comments are, and we'll just have a little discussion that way through that comment or through the chat feature. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce Jody Wilson, who is a member of the Friends of the Kirk-Bear Canyon Library, and she's going to introduce our speaker. Jody?
Okay. Kathy McKintosh grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles. Her parents instilled in her a love of books and nature. They frequently packed up their Ford Falcon with Kathy and her sister and the camping gear, and off they went to the Sierras or to Arizona, where Kathy undoubtedly began developing her love of nature. Kathy is a reformed high-tech marketeer, a former newspaper columnist, a former speaker on words and business writing. Eventually, she combined her love of nature and her love of words into her fiction. After many years in Idaho, in 2014, she and her husband moved to Tucson. Her first two novels, the award-winning Mustard's Last Stand and Foul Wind, are humorous romps in the wilds of northern Idaho. Her newest book, Murder Sonoran Style, portrays death in the heat of the Arizona desert, which, believe it or not, has a light touch and lots of laughter. That one earned the honorable mention in the Public Safety Writers 2019 writing competition. Nowadays, Kathy is busy finishing the second in the Adventure Call series, this one taking place in Cottonwood, Arizona. She is also working on an audio version of her book, Murder Sonoran Style. I read that book, and my favorite, funniest part is the dialogue, which I think I would enjoy hearing on audio form. So I recommend that you try it when it's available. You can learn more about Kathy's work on her website, www.kathymckintosh.com. I've been there, and her blog entries are really fun to read. Sign up for a newsletter there and you'll get a free story. Also, don't forget you can get Kathy's books at the Pima County Public Library, as well as the usual online book sales sites. Take it from there, Kathy. We're looking forward to hearing you.
Well, Jody, thank you very much for introducing me, and thank you for reading my book. I appreciate it. And interestingly enough, I just got a notice from ACX that my audio people are done, and I've already approved the audio chapter by chapter working with the woman. So it should be out pretty soon in audio form, which a lot of my friends actually prefer to the written word. So I'm looking forward to it. And I believe that the reader, Al, did a really marvelous job of recording it. So now, let's see. It says right here, don't click on the slide yet. That was my note to myself. I am really looking forward to chatting about humor because I'm a big fan of humor and of laughter. As Mark Twain said, the human race has one really excellent weapon, and that is laughter. And it can be used, I hope, not always as a weapon. We'll talk about that tonight. As Jody said in the introduction, I fell in love with Arizona when I was a child, especially Indian country, but really all parts of our state. And I'd always imagined myself as this little old lady who lived in the desert. And now that's who I am. So I was really pleased when we decided to leave Idaho and head down to Tucson. I left time for questions at the end. And as Elise said already, you could put your questions in the chat box. I will have a couple of questions for you that I'll ask you to chat in the answers. And if that doesn't work, then we'll just carry on from there, okay? And you do know who I am now. So if you have any questions that hang on after tonight's presentation, please just send them to me via my website or at Kathy@kathymckintosh.com. So let's see what's on the agenda. I've got a screen share now, so let me learn how to do that. There we go. Whoops. Okay. Tonight we're going to talk about the why, the when, the how, and who done it or still does it in mysteries. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. So analyzing, this quote is a good one. Analyzing humor is like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested and the frog dies of it. Well, E.B. White is one of my idols just because he wrote and created Charlotte's Web, and he also wrote Elements of Style with William Strunk. But I'm going to pull out my scalpel anyway and do a bit of analysis about why humor occurs in mystery fiction, when it's helpful, and how it works best. Along the way, I'm going to mention many of my favorite funny mystery writers, and then we'll go on to questions. And I have provided a list of my favorite authors in the humorous mystery genre, which I also could make available by email if you like. So, as Rodney Dangerfield would say, humor can't get no respect. They really don't get as much respect as those blood and guts mysteries that a lot of people love. There's only one prestigious award for humorous mysteries, and that's the Lefty. That's the Lefty, which is given annually at the Left Coast Crime Mystery Conference. The Lefty was for a long time, since 1996 to 2016, the only humorous mystery award that they handed out, the only mystery award that they handed out at Left Coast Crime. But then in 2016, they decided that they needed to bring in the mystery awards for historical mystery and best debut mystery. So even at that conference, humor is only one of many. In the Edgar Awards, which is the primary honor for Mystery Writers of America, and the Seamus Awards, which is for the Private Eye Writers of America, there is no category for humor. I think that's a shame because I love humor. So is it changing that humor has a little less respect? Why is it that it's less respected? Well, even the very first creators of humor, of comedy, among them Aristophanes, who was a very early Greek playwright of comedies and social commentary, they faced some critics. Aristophanes was very popular in his lifetime, and some of his plays, like the Lysistrata, are even shown today and enjoyed. I've seen it, or at least I've read it, I can't remember, and that's a few years later. But still, the philosophers and most likely the literary critics of his time, they were leery. Plato objected to comedy and laughter because he felt it could be cruel. He and other philosophers believed that humor was on a lower level of literature. Both of them sought out and they honored reason far above any emotion. So they considered laughter, as evoked by comedy, an emotion to be shunned. Too often, both of these men opined, laughter is garnered at the expense of others and is cruel. And yet, Aristophanes' comedies were social commentaries as well as comedies. He wrote about politics, about women's place in society, and other social issues. And even though they were humorous, they had a lot of reason, and they had a moral, which Plato feared comedy never had a moral. However, it's true that that opinion, that laughter and comedy are too often cruel, is retained even today. Here's a quote from one of my favorite comedians, Ellen DeGeneres. She said, "Most comedy is based on getting a laugh at somebody else's expense. And I find that that's just a form of bullying in a major way. So I want to be an example that you can be funny and be kind and make people laugh without hurting somebody else's feelings." Well, I just disagree with Ellen. I like her, but I don't think that every form of humor takes its laughter at the expense of others or is bullying. It's my belief that laughter is good for you, and it's backed with research. We've all heard that laughter is the best medicine. Good laughter relaxes the whole body, and it leaves muscles relaxed for up to 45 minutes. It boosts the immune system, and it decreases stress hormones and increases immune cells and infection-fighting antibodies, thus improving our resistance to disease. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins, our natural feel-good hormones, or actually chemicals. Endorphins promote an overall sense of well-being, as you know, and they can even temporarily relieve pain. So laughter relieves pain. It burns calories. It's not much of a replacement for a hike or a trip to the gym, but one study found that laughing for 10 to 15 minutes a day can burn approximately 40 calories. And over the course of the year, that could be 3 or 4 pounds lost. So there we have a new diet trick. And laughter can even help you live longer. There was a study in Norway, and it found that people with a strong sense of humor outlive those who don't live as long. Who don't laugh as much. The difference was noted especially in that study for those who are battling cancer. Way back in the 70s, I and 2 other people launched HealthWise, an organization founded to help patients work best with their physicians. I wrote the first HealthWise handbook. Little did I know when I wrote Mustard's Last Stand, my first novel, that I was, again, trying to save lives and help people be healthy. So what kinds of humor are there? Well, one of my sources listed all these, and I tend to agree. There is kid stuff. Why did the cookie go to the nurse? Because it felt crummy. Or pun. Did you know that the tallest building in town is the library? It has thousands of stories. Cozy mystery titles are particularly good at puns. Chili con carnage, shot through the hearth. And Donna Andrews, who writes about birds, is probably the master of titles. The Gift of the Magpie, Cockatiels at 7, those are a couple of my favorites. There's slapstick, that's another type of humor, and Carl Hyacin, I think, and Janet Ivanovich are masters of that. There's hyperbole or exaggeration, like skinny as a rail or big as a house. Also incongruity. Imagine if there were no hypothetical situations. Surprise, give them what they're not expecting, is probably the most important element of humor in writing. And that's why I have it in red font, not to represent blood, just to tell you that that's the most important part. Sarcasm, and here's another example from good old Mark Twain. It's better to keep your mouth shut and appear stupid than open it and remove all doubt. That's one of my favorites. And it was one of my father's favorites too, so that's another reason I grew up loving to laugh. Satire can make fun of a situation and expose its flaws, political or any kind of a situation. Carl Hyacint's latest book, Squeeze Me, is great satire. And if you haven't read it, I'd recommend it. Irony is another element or another type of humor, and that is a statement of the opposite of what's going on. And an easy example is lovely weather we're having here in the midst of a snowstorm. Now I want to share, if you will permit me, a kid stuff joke about mystery writers. How many mystery writers does it take to change a light bulb? 2. 1 to screw it almost all the way in, and the other to give it a surprising twist at the end. So that's my little joke. So now here's where I was going to ask you to participate. I don't know if I can see your reactions, but I have a couple of examples from the book I'm editing right now, Murder Cottonwood style. And I'm going to ask you what kind of humor this is, or you think it might be. I rubbed my right shoulder, the one that carried all my tension, always. Amazingly, it was rock-like and aching. I forced my shoulders down. I'd say that's probably an example of irony. Let's try another one. The police officer says to our heroine, just a couple more questions. I can see you're wearing thin, and I understand this has been stressful after she found a dead body. Have you lost other clients? So much for her sympathetic words. Another trap? I smiled. We try to keep it one per trip. I threw my hand to my mouth. Forgive me, warped humor. No, I've never lost another client. And strictly speaking, Violet was no longer a client. I think that's an example of sarcasm in humor. Here is another example. Was she angry with anyone in the same interview with a police officer? Was she angry with anyone else from adventure calls or just you? The woman, she thinks, was a questioning demon. Her queries were never going to end. I would be here when snow fell, answering Sergeant Dowdy's incessant questions, never getting a chance to pee or eat, or I shook my head. I call that an example of exaggeration. And I call this an example of thirsty. So why would we want to add humor to a mystery? Well, to provide comic relief, to break the tension, change the pace, lighten the tone when things might get too dark, or sometimes simply to underscore the horror or provide contrast to that horror. Or we might use it to entertain. Witty dialogue and banter, especially long-running interchanges between likable characters. And you'll see that often in some of the older mysteries and also in police procedurals. Along with that dark humor, there's a lot of witty banter between the two partners. You can use humor in a mystery to ridicule or poke fun at specific character traits, institutions, belief systems, literary conventions. Through almost any of those techniques like exaggeration, irony, burlesque even. However, whatever the purpose it is serving, the humor itself should grow organically from the story's elements, the plot, the character, the theme, setting, event, whether singly or in combination. To be organic, it must arise from and be consistent with the story narrative. You just don't want to plop in something funny or plop in a little joke like my silly mystery writers and their light bulb. You need to have it all go along with the plot and be organic to that plot. When TFOB, Tucson Festival of Books, was on, this year I watched Mateo Ascarapur, who wrote Black Buck, and Brian Washington, who wrote Memorial, speak about the humanizing power of humor. Now, they do not write mysteries, but again, they stress that humor must be organic and that the characters must be fully formed, not just caricatures stuck in merely for laughs. I have Black Buck on hold at the library, but there's a long waiting list. So I think a lot of people must be interested in that. From the moderator just said it was really a funny mystery. Novel. So why do some writers choose funny and others go to the dark side? For me, humor is a reflex where I go to deflect bad things, but also it's just how my brain works. Some, like author Jess Lowry, wrote funny when life became very, very hard to face. I really suggest her Myra James series if you're looking for humorous mysteries. Humor works in many ways. I asked author and screenwriter Ellen Byron why about humor, and she told me that humor is healing. She told me the story of being diagnosed with a rare tumor on a Friday and in surgery by the following Tuesday. She had to get up and walk around because that's what they always recommend right after your surgery. And she had an IV attached with a drip bag. So she had to wheel that IV on the rollers around with her. She wrapped a scarf around it and she introduced the IV to the nurses as her boyfriend. Now that was a way to lighten a very serious situation. It can get you, humor gets you through tough times. So how do mystery writers add humor? Well, we talked about it a little bit before. We can either sprinkle it lightly or as a full-on comic caper like Carl Hiaasen. Oftentimes the basic premise is just a silly one. In Mustard's Last Stand, my book was about a fight against a faux safari camp set up with lions and zebras and water buffaloes in North Idaho. That's basically a silly premise because zebras can't live in North Idaho. But I have to tell you, one of the people who came to my first signing said, "Can zebras and water buffaloes really live up there? Isn't it too cold for them?" And I said, "Yes, it's too cold. That was supposed to be a joke." So that was my attempt at a silly premise. You can add humor with your characters. A lot of mystery writers use animals to add humor. Cats and dogs and hamsters and monkeys and snakes, what have you. Secondary characters can also add a light touch. But again, as we mentioned before, a secondary character is going to be a lot funnier and a lot more believable if they're fully formed and not just a caricature. Sometimes, however, a walk-on character can add a light touch, and they can just be sort of something very funny and very amusing, perhaps by the way they dress or the way they look. Wordplay can also be an element of humor that I really appreciate in a book. Here's an example, and I can't remember what book it's from, but not mine, alas. We've nabbed two auspicious characters, Captain. Humor's relative. Whoops, excuse me. Do any of you know who Mrs. Malaprop was? Mrs. Malaprop was a funny character, and oh my goodness, I can't remember who the author was. It might have been the guy who wrote The Importance of Being Earnest, but Mrs. Malaprop never got her words right. And she was a very, very humorous character. So much so that a malapropism today is a word that's misspoken. So readers have a very different approach, or they have strong opinions about humor. And I'm in a Facebook group called Book Natter, and we talk about different books that we've read. And the moderator of that group, who happens to be a friend of mine, Karen Zoldan, she wrote on there when I asked them about what they think of humor and mystery, she said, humor is relative. And if I don't think it's funny, then it wears me down. It should never get in the way of telling the story and should be a lightly sprinkled condiment versus a side dish. I thought that was a really good way of a reader telling us as authors, me as an author, how much to add. And how humor is added, it's very different for every author. Mine kind of comes naturally when I'm writing along. Something funny comes to me and I figure if I laugh that the reader's going to laugh. However, sometimes I'll have a critique partner say, well, I think you could put something funny right there. And the problem then is that it's perhaps not as easy as they think to add a bit of humor right then. At least that's what I always thought until I heard that young man, Brian Washington at Tucson Festival of Books, say that he meticulously plans his entire plot down to exactly where he's going to put something funny, something serious, something contrasting. So I guess I'm going to be learning a lot from writing more and more mysteries. So now we have classic examples of humor and mysteries. Dorothy L. Sayers. Have any of you read her books? I hope so. Lord Peter Wimsey series is a great one. And in it, she said, in her first book, where she introduced Lord Peter Wimsey, she says, his long, amiable face looked as if it had generated spontaneously from his top hat, as white maggots breed from gorgonzola. Now, is that not funny or is it gross? I don't know. I think it's funny. And in the classic Rex Stout novels of Nero Wolfe was a hoot because of his absolute eccentricities. And his assistant Archie was also a funny guy, and he added the humor. Simon Brett is a British author who's still writing, and his characters are just absolutely a hoot. And he was known for his witty dialogue, and he is known for his witty dialogue and quirky characters. Two authors, American authors, did receive Edgar Awards and honor from Mystery Writers of America, and one of them is Lawrence Block, and the other is Donald Westlake. Donald Westlake wrote tons of books under his name and under pseudonyms, but my favorites are his comic capers that featured John Dortmunder and a band of bungling burglars. They are really a hoot. And of course, Carl Hiaasen, whose mysteries, you could tell I'm in love with Carl Hiaasen. I just love his mysteries, especially his early ones and his latest. And Janet Ivanovich, she has absolutely funny characters and slapstick events. So all those elements of humor that we talked about, each author incorporates them in different ways. And Hiaasen not only has satiric comedy, he gives a great message about the environmental degradation of South Florida. So I don't know how we're doing on time, and it doesn't matter. We will just continue on unless you tell me to cut. So I thought I'd give you a few examples, which I already have from my new, whoops, where did it go back? I don't know how to go back. So I won't worry about that. I thought I'd read a little bit from
Kathy, you can
novels.
go
Yeah.
back just by pressing the left arrow on your.
There we go. Thank you so much, Elise. Okay, I thought I'd read just a little bit from a couple of my books. I wrote my first novel, Mustard's Last Stand, after my idol, Carl Hyacin. And when I went to a workshop, the agent who taught the workshop said, well, Kathy, you just will now portray yourself as the Carl Hyacin of Idaho. I don't know, I tried that, but some people hadn't heard of Carl Hyacin, so it kind of worked. But in my first novel, an eco-activist named Roadkill enlists his brother and 4 pregnant women to stop a fake safari camp being established in North Idaho. As I said before, zebras and lions in Idaho. So the book had a lot of broad, almost slapstick humor, and things like my protagonist slipping in cow poop and other pratfalls and riding a water buffalo at one point. The next novel focuses on one of those pregnant women. Oh, I forgot that he enlists his brother and 4 pregnant women to get rid of this faux safari camp. So in the next novel, called Foul Wind, it focused on one of those pregnant women, Feather Sullivan, who gets caught up in blackmail and murder at a wind farm with hogs and her elegant mother. It has broad humor as well, but it also contains what I hope is humor in much of the dialogue. Here's an example from Foul Wind. In that book, I use minor characters and introduce a little humor around those characters, but still try to make them seem well-rounded. Here we have a PI named Michael who's investigating the protagonist, Feather Sullivan. He walks into a general store and talks to the owner. She says, "We don't get many visitors in Hancock. You a hunter?" She glanced at his shoes and shook her head. "Not unless your boots are in your car." Taking in his khaki slacks and button-down shirt, open, no tie, she revised her guess, shaking her head and pursing her lips. "Salesman, can't think of a thing I need to stock here. Business is slow, slower than usual." Realizing he was much more of a hunter than a salesman, but glad the woman couldn't tell, Michael smiled. "I'm not selling a thing, just picking up some snacks for the car. Well, for me to eat in the car." She didn't smile. Not much sense of humor here. Here's another one. In the same book, our female sleuth, Feather, meets the grandmother of someone she's been questioning. The grandmother speaks. "I heard the word murder, and I heard her say you killed someone." Instead of edging away, the woman moved closer to Feather. "But I don't believe it now that we've had a chance to chat. It's a shame. I phoned the police." "You called the police?" Stunned, Feather echoed the woman's words. "I was worried for my granddaughter. These days one must be cautious. But then you sat down beside me." How cautious was that? Why she continued this inane conversation, Feather had no idea. It was time to make tracks, vamoose, scat, scram. She stood, her knees wobbled, her mouth dried up, and she feared she couldn't protest her innocence to this woman or the cops. She licked her lips. "You're not a killer. Neither is little Sophie. I'll stall the fuzz when they get here, pretend to be senile." She winked at me. "It always works. They'll take me home and you'll have time to get away. But you have to promise to help Sophia. Let her know I love her no matter what, no matter how strangely she's been acting." She extracted a pink card with her name, Victoria Douglas, and her address on it. "I tell the cops my daughter had these made for me in case I get lost or confused. Of course, my daughter lives in France and has nothing to do with me. I don't know what's going on, but if it's upsetting Sophia, you must fix it. I love my granddaughter. I want to know what is wrong, no matter what it is." She licked her lips. "Even if she were the killer, I would love her." Feather walked away, a woman on a stroll after a lovely afternoon at the carousel. In Murder Sonoran Style, the one that's my new series, the first book in my new series about an eco tour company. The protagonist finds a dead body and seeks out the killer. His new team has been out in the desert training and are called back to their training headquarters. As they come back to camp, we get a feel for their personalities. Here's one. Gabe, that's our protagonist. Gabe returned to the casita and was sent out by Madrone to collect dead shrubs for firewood. By the time he got back, Jesse had returned, having survived what Jesse termed a grueling interrogation. He joined Gabe in another firewood foray. Each trip had to extend further out because only fallen wood could be collected. A rustling in the chaparral startled Gabe and he jerked up, almost dropping his armful of sticks. "Hey, Gabe, don't drop a load," called the jeering voice of Ben Berthoff. The young man appeared from behind the bush. "Didn't mean to startle you." "Oh, yes, you did." Ben, the practical joker of the group during training, left no one unscathed from his silly but usually harmless pranks. Ben's worst so far was replacing the cream in the bag of Oreos with toothpaste. Never again would Gabe approach an Oreo with innocent eagerness. So I get to push the button now to go forward. This is my difficult to read list of humorous mystery authors, and I tried to alphabetize it, so I had some trouble. But these are just some of my favorites, and I believe I have read all but two of, I have sampled books by all but two of these people. Some of them are Southwest writers. Some of them are writers who write more serious books, but have amused me or some of my friends with some of their others of their books. And this is the list that, if you wish, I can send to you. I added myself to the list because Elise would have told me that I had to do that. I need to be proud of my work. And now we are open for questions.
This
I'm
is
going
just
to stop sharing.
great. And I wish that I wish that we could all have, you could hear all the laughter from all of us during that thing, during your presentation. So because we're a relatively small group, I'm going to suggest that everybody unmute here. And I'm going to start off just by reading some of these comments, but then, you know, maybe we can just, you know, ask questions and share some thoughts. Okay. So, you know, everybody can unmute now, but I'm just going to go through what we have in the chat so far, because I'm sure we've been keeping up on it, but Kathy, since you've been speaking, you can't keep up on everything.
Couldn't see that.
So a lot of comments. DR liked your E.B. White quote and then asked, didn't Aristophanes write a play called The Frogs?
Yes, yes, he did.
Yes, so that was cool. I mentioned that I liked the fact that, you know, laughter was a diet program. Those of you who know me know that I've lost some weight recently. So, and another person listening in said they're definitely going to try that too. Beth from the library, she's actually an employee of the library, said we need a laugh track. And I commented that I was laughing out loud through a lot of your talk myself. And I just discovered I like kid humor.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, what can I say?
I have to just interrupt myself here. But when my husband took me out on our first date, I put me in the car and we're driving out from my parents' house, and he just turned to me and said, where do the Russians keep their armies? And I'm thinking, this is a conversation starter. Okay. And I just looked at him and I said, I don't know. And he looked at me and says, up their sleeveys.
Oh, yeah, those are the kinds of jokes.
And I thought to myself, this man is hilarious. And I married him. Anyway, so great pickup line. Anyway, let's see. DR, love your surprising twist. That was great. Anne Amy Grace wanted your list. If you could give us a list of the books you mentioned on satire and irony. She was particularly interested in that. And you know what? If you could email me any lists, I'm going to make a little, so nobody leave before I make a list of everybody who's here. And if Amy Grace and Judith Peters can send your email, or maybe Jody has your email address. Yeah.
I should have them, and if everybody gives me their permission, Amy, I can't see you, but maybe you can give me a thumbs up or something. I will send the Kathy your email addresses so she can answer your
Great.
correctly.
Then we had from Beth, who's the person from the library. She actually said, Kathy, would you consider being a writer in residence at Pima County Public Library?
Oh, wow. Always. I really admire those people. I'd love to.
Good. Well, maybe the two of you can have a direct conversation.
Yeah, and if I can add that DR also expressed interest in that program, Elise. So if you could kind of set us up, you know, this is something that's on a specific timeline, but we are open and looking.
Okay, I will send,
Oh, that'd be
Beth,
cool.
after I'm off duty here
Yeah.
tonight, I will send both Kathy McKintosh and DR Ransdale's email address to you so you can contact them. Would that be okay?
That would be fine.
Okay, great. Let's see. Then we had your quote about Mrs. Malaprop. DR says it's Richard Sheridan.
That's probably right.
Yeah.
DR's
And
the English professor.
Beth made a comment about the condiment thing that you were talking about. Humor as a condiment was a good direction from a reader.
Mhm.
And Amy Grace likes Dorothy Sayers. And I made the comment that I like Robert Goldborough, who actually took over from Rex Stout with that Nero Wolfe series. And I actually like him better.
Oh,
So let's, and DR made a comment. She and Kathy are friends. She said, Kathy and I are actually a good team. She just helped me with my latest novel. So that's for
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
DR was our first speaker in this series of 4. So, you know, we have a little collaboration happening. So I want to open this up to everybody. You know, if you have comments, or maybe one of the things that occurred to me is I'm curious about everybody here. If you have a favorite author that you like because of their humor, just speak out.
I do, but I unfortunately I can't remember his last name, but if I say something about him, David is his first name. He writes about dogs and rehabilitating dogs is a theme in his mystery novels.
Is that David Rosenberg?
Yes.
Yeah, he's on my list. He's pretty good. I enjoy his books too.
And
yeah.
he tells the story of he wrote a book and they put a dog on the cover, and it sold so much better than any other book that they had ever published before. So the next book he wrote, they put 2 dogs on the cover. And then the next book, they put a whole family of dogs on the cover. And anyway, which brings me to just a question that maybe you'll comment on later after other people have a chance to talk about their favorite humorous writers, is book covers. I loved your book covers, especially the pig one. I knew I was in for a good romp when I saw the book covers. I knew that D.R. Ransdale's books were going to have a lighthearted element from looking at her book covers. I don't always know. And I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it doesn't sell to suggest it's humorous. Maybe people think it's not scary or enough. I just wondered if there was any philosophy in publishing as to book covers and how they affect sales of humorous mysteries.
It seems to me like the cozy books, you know, like those publishers make a real big attempt to make the cozy covers look really cozy. But I think when the books have sort of a combination of serious and comic elements, then I think it maybe gets a little trickier. I'm not sure. I don't know, Kathy. I don't know what you think.
Well, I agree, and it's an ongoing discussion among writers, especially independent authors, because I am an independent author. I publish my own books after my small press publisher died. So it's,
I hope you had
and
nothing
you will
to do with that.
I had nothing to do with it. She hadn't really gotten a whole lot done about it, but she did develop the first cover of my very first book. But they'll tell you that the font has to be a certain size and a certain color. And it seems to be very, very important, because people will, in browsing the bookshelves or browsing Amazon or other online stores, will decide by a cover. And I know, I'm glad you appreciated my cover with the pig. I've changed it several times. I had someone change it only because some of the reviewers said, well, I almost didn't read this because of the stupid cover with the stupid zebra on it, but it was really a pretty good book. And oh dear. So covers are very, very important. And DR's right. I love the covers of a whole lot of cozies, but both her books and my books are sort of not cozies, but kind of. They're not really bloody murderous, but they're not quite cozies, and that is hard to do with a cover.
Do you have someone who designs your covers for you?
I do. But my Murder Sonoran style, my most recent book, was a different cover designer than the other two.
So how about somebody else's favorite?
I got started, I think, in the mystery world with two people that are really opposite, and one was Lawrence Block, and the other was Ross McDonald, who writes darker. But Lawrence Block with The Burglar in the Closet, because I think that's just perfect. And I know that I've in some ways borrowed from some of his things, because actually Andy too gets involved in these stupid situations that he has no business in, and that's what happens with the Bernie Rodenbar character in the Lawrence Block burglar books. He goes in to just steal a painting, and then damn it, then there's a dead body, and I just get a kick out of that. Accidental sleuth, I think, is perfect.
Yeah,
He's my favorite as well.
But Elise, you should mention those two, the two authors of the books that we've read about India, that take place in India, because both of the India and then Thailand, because those are really fun, and a lot of people might not know about those.
Yeah, they are. I'm going to look up while we're talking. How about some of the other folks? What are your favorite humorous authors?
Amy Grace just volunteered P.G. Wodehouse and Joanne Fuchs.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear the last one. Joanne who?
Luke.
And I can't get over John Mortimer, specifically Rumble of the Bailey. I can listen to those over and over and over again and still learn more every time.
Yeah.
So.
I've got several of these people on my list, although it's the world's tiniest slide, but Tarquin Hall is the one who writes about India, and he is so funny.
Oh, he's hilarious.
Yes, and Elise introduced those to me, and they are just a hoot.
And the guy in Thailand is Zach Brody, B-R-O-D-Y. I think it's B-R-O-D-Y. I have to check that.
Yeah, I thought it was Brodsky or something. B-R-O-D-S-K-Y. Yeah.
Brodsky.
Yeah, and I didn't add him to the list because I haven't finished the book, and I tried to be good, but I ran out of reading.
But Tarquin Hall is hilarious. If you are into culture, Indian culture, I mean, it's unbelievable how accurate he is. But he presents it in a funny, not in a harsh, funny manner, but in a really hilarious, funny manner.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
He's gentle, and
Yes,
his humor is gentle and funny. I really like it.
Kathy, do you keep track of everything you've read and keep notes on it all?
Ha. Yeah, DR does, but I do not, and I should. But now that Goodreads keeps track of everything that you've read, it's a lot nicer. Well, not everything you've read, because, and then the library, I really appreciate the fact that the library system has all the books I've read, so I can go back because I tend to forget. But I should take notes and I should keep track of everything I read. And I am not that organized. I am not that person. So I forgive myself. So no, I don't. But I'd like to.
By the way, Amy Grace just made the comment that your list was, the print was so small, she had trouble reading it. So
Wouldn't. I had a heck of a time getting it into a slide format. So
I bet you did. Yeah. So, yeah. So, you know, I think everybody would love to have that as an email, and I bet it's at regular 12 or 14 point.
Oh, yes, I have it on a PDF format and a Word format, and trying to get that into a PowerPoint slide stumped me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, Corey, do you have a favorite humorous author?
You know, I'm sure I do. I just haven't had a lot of time to do reading lately, and I'm just not thinking of one.
Well, Nancy,
I
how about
really
you?
Well, I used to enjoy Janet Ivanovich, and then I just got really tired of her because it was just the same thing over and over. I'm not, I like Carl Hiaasen, but I don't go seeking out funny mysteries. I prefer the darker. I did notice when I was reading Mike Hayes's series, Mad Dog and Englishman, that there are